This is World Civilization. My name is Dr. Long. This video is entitled The Impact of Technology. It especially deals with technology in the industrial age. Now, because technology and new technological developments are such an essential part of the modern world, many people seem to think that few technological developments took place prior to the modern era. However, that is not the case. Indeed, the word technology itself comes from the ancient Greeks, from the word techne, which means skill with art or craft. The reason that technology is so important to humans is because it saves labor and time. To give one brief example, you could wash all of your clothes by hand down by the river or at a stream, and that's how people have washed their clothes for thousands of years, in fact, and how people in some developing countries still wash their clothes today. However, washing your clothes in a washing machine saves you time and allows you to avoid a tedious chore. And technology multiplies across many, many tedious chores. According to historian of technology Joel Mocher, a society needs three things in order to innovate technologically. First, as Mocher puts it, you need a core group of resourceful innovators. Second, you need social and economic institutions that give incentives for innovation. And third, you need diversity and tolerance. Now, other historians such as William McNeill and J.R. McNeill stress the human web, the connections between different groups of people sharing ideas for innovation to occur. Prior to 1500 CE, the Chinese led the way in inventing a number of things, such as paper, the printing press, the compass, and gunpowder. The Islamic world was also very advanced in science until around the 12th and 13th centuries, when it seems to have lost steam after the collapse of the Abbasid Caliphate with the Mongol conquest and sack of Baghdad in 1258. Now, medieval Europeans made some advances in technology, for instance, in windmills and water mills, as well as navigational technology. Europeans also borrowed very heavily from China and from the Islamic world. However, as historian Joel Mocher argues, after 1500, Europeans came to lead the world in technological developments. Between 1500 and 1750, Europeans made advancements in metallurgy and weaponry, particularly muskets and cannons. Europe also experienced a scientific revolution in the Enlightenment in the 17th and 18th centuries, both of which encouraged new discoveries and innovations. While it was largely engineers and mechanics that came to develop new machines and not scientists, scientific discoveries certainly helped engineers. Moreover, after the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment, inventing new machines was not only financially rewarding, but socially prestigious. And again, this goes to Mocher's point about the importance of social institutions and incentives for innovation. Also in Europe, competition and the existence of several rival nations made it difficult for any one nation or group of people to stifle innovation. In contrast, China was united under an imperial government with a Confucian imperial bureaucracy that discouraged further innovation. Likewise, in the Islamic world, for many centuries, the Ottoman Empire, the most dominant empire in the Islamic world, actually banned the printing press, fearing it would be used to spread views critical of the government. In fact, while Johann Gutenberg is credited with inventing the printing press in Europe in the 1450s, leading to a boom in printing, the first book printed in the Ottoman Empire only appeared in 1729. So this put the Ottomans in the Islamic world far behind the West, nearly 300 years. And this had a negative impact on the spread of education, as well as scientific and technological developments in the Islamic world. The period between 1789 and 1914 has often been referred to by historians as the long 19th century. Now, this was a period of incredible technological innovation in the Western world. Technological development was one, although not the only factor, in the Industrial Revolution. Certainly, new technology went hand in hand with industrialization. From the 1780s until 1850, the leading industries, and thus the cutting-edge technologies, were in textiles and iron. From the 1850s until 1914, other industries such as steel, chemicals, and petroleum would then come to lead the way. All in all, the Industrial Revolution was the machine age. It was an age of inventors, engineers, mechanics, who created new machines and were often well rewarded for their efforts. While technology had its benefits, it's worth pointing out that new technology is often disruptive, sometimes even eliminating jobs. This occurred in Great Britain in the early decades of the Industrial Revolution, leading to the Luddite protest, a group of workers led by Ned Ludd who would smash machines they thought were taking their jobs. Still, these and other protests ultimately could not slow down the pace of innovation. Technological developments during the long 19th century, the period from 1789 until 1914, can be classified into 6 major categories. First are textiles. The textile industry, as I mentioned, was one of the leading industries in Great Britain during the early phases of the Industrial Revolution. Machines such as the spinning jenny, which was invented by James Hargreaves in 1764, and the spinning mule, invented by Samuel Crompton in 1779, were important textile machines that allowed textile mills to have workers operate multiple spindles and bobbins, producing a great deal of textile. Also, in 1793, Eli Whitney invented the cotton gin. This was a machine that separated seeds from cotton, allowing cotton to be used in textiles on a large scale. After the 1790s, textile mills increasingly used cotton instead of wool. The textile industry was very important in early industrialization, and so these new machines were very key. Also, the popularity of cotton made cotton, and thus slavery, very important in the American South from the 1820s up until the end of the Civil War in 1865. The second major industry is metallurgy. Besides textiles, the iron industry was one of the leading industries during the Industrial Revolution in Britain. Iron was the main metal used from the 1790s to the 1850s, used in everything from engines to bridges and railroads. The most important development that aided the iron industry was the puddling and rolling techniques, which British inventor Henry Cort came up with in 1783 and 1784. Now, the puddling and rolling techniques removed impurities from iron and allowed for the mass production of iron. Now, arguably the most important innovation in metallurgy was British innovator Henry Bessemer's invention of what's called the Bessemer process in 1856. The Bessemer process likewise removed impurities in the steelmaking process, and this in turn allowed for the mass production of steel and allowed for cheap steel. Steel is stronger, more versatile than iron, and steel came to replace iron as the main metal used in industries after the 1850s. Steel came to be used in everything from engines and railroads and weapons, and by the early 20th century, it was even used in the first skyscrapers, buildings built out of steel and glass. The third major area of innovation was in engines and transportation. Perhaps the most famous engine invented during the early decades of the Industrial Revolution was the steam engine, invented by James Watt in 1781. Now, James Watt's steam engine was incredibly important. The steam engine was widely used in factory machines, in engines for transportation between the 1780s and 1850s. What made the steam engine so revolutionary was, unlike water-powered engines that came before it, you could put a steam engine anywhere. You didn't need to locate it besides running water. Steam engines were used in mining, factories, and textile mills, and also in transportation. In 1807, American inventor Robert Fulton invented the first steamship, the first ship powered by an engine that was much faster than sailing ships that came before it. On land, British inventor George Stephenson invented the railroad in 1825. This had a dramatic influence on travel as railroads were much faster in moving goods and passengers than horses, wagons, and buggies. By the 1850s, many European countries and the United States were experiencing a boom in railroad construction. In 1869, the United States completed a transcontinental railroad linking the east and west coast of the United States. On a similar note, the Russians completed the Trans-Siberian Railroad from Moscow to the Pacific Ocean in 1916. Europeans would likewise build railroads in their colonies in Africa and Asia as well. By the 1870s and 1880s, time zones were added to help railroads. And in the late 19th century, several German innovators made great strides with engines as well. Nicholas Otto, Gottlob Daimler, and Otto Benz together made contributions between 1876 and 1885 that resulted in the invention of the internal combustion engine. This was the first engine to run on gasoline. Likewise, in 1897, another German, Rudolf Diesel, invented the first diesel engine. Now, all of these new engines run on gasoline and diesel made the automobile and the airplane possible. And American inventors Oliver and Wilbur Wright were actually the first to fly an airplane in 1903. And faster ships also became possible because of the internal combustion engine run on gasoline as well. The fourth major area of innovation was in communications. The first was American inventor Samuel Morse's invention of the telegraph in the 1840s. Now, this is sometimes known as Morse code. It transmitted messages over wires and was the first form of instant communication, becoming widely used after the 1840s. Next, in 1876, American inventor Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone. That also revolutionized communication. Another key development was Italian inventor Guglielmo Marconi's invention of the radio in 1896. Also, in 1865, the Danish inventor Reverend Rasmus Hansen invented the first typewriter, a device that revolutionized office communication. So by the late 19th century, telephone lines would span much of the world, with radio on the rise. All of this revolutionizing the speed of communication and news. The fifth major area of innovation was in chemicals and electricity. In 1839, American inventor Charles Goodyear vulcanized rubber. This process allowed for the use of rubber parts in engine and tires. By the 1890s, the Western world was experiencing a bicycle craze even, and this was made possible by rubber tires. Rubber tires were also, of course, important for automobiles as well. In 1848, British inventor James Young first would refine crude oil. This allowed for the refining of petroleum into oil and gasoline and helped make both the oil industry and the internal combustion engine possible. In 1879, American inventor Thomas Edison would invent the light bulb. Shortly thereafter, American inventor George Westinghouse developed alternating current, allowing the transmission of electricity over long distances. So this allowed for electricity and electric lights, a huge change in how people lived. Thomas Edison, for his part, was one of the most famous men in America in the late 19th century. He also pioneered the use of research labs run by companies to come up with even further inventions. In 1841, American physician John Gortay invented the first ice machine. Now, this would lead to the invention of refrigeration, which revolutionized the shipment and storage of foods by the 1890s. The sixth and final category of innovation was in weaponry. In 1836, American inventor Samuel Colt would patent the first revolver. Next, in 1849, French Army officer Claude Etienne Minié invented the first infantry rifle. The rifling process, which cuts grooves in the barrel of guns, makes guns much more accurate. In addition to accuracy, in 1885, American inventor Hiram Maxim invented the first machine gun. Now, the Maxim gun, as it was known, was a primitive form of machine guns, but other machine guns would follow and be much more accurate and much quicker. Advances in steel made heavy artillery possible as well. So between rifles, machine guns, and heavy artillery, by the late 19th century, weapons had become much more accurate and much faster. This gave modern armies, particularly modern Western armies, an unprecedented amount of firepower, like nothing the world had seen before. So let's draw some conclusions. The Western world, primarily European nations and the United States, led the way in technological developments during the long 19th century, from 1789 to 1914. And this completely changed how we live. Western nations gave incentives for inventors to come up with new technology, both financial and in terms of social prestige. New innovations helped industry and helped spur economic growth. As you can see from this video, the rate of new inventions during the long 19th century was dizzying, and I've only covered a few, with one invention coming after the other. Inventors often built on each other's accomplishments, meaning the atmosphere of this period and the inner working of various inventions was key. And this period saw a fast rate of new inventions unlike any period before it. All of these inventions, from transportation to communication to electricity and chemicals, greatly changed how people lived. The modern world we live in today would be unthinkable without the inventions created in this era. Finally, all of these inventions, especially transportation, communications, and weaponry, allowed for a new age of Western imperialism in which the West came to dominate much of the world by 1914. I'll stop here. Thanks for watching.